So,
I formally request a Dhamma talk. Brahmacharloka dipati sahampati katanjaliana divaramaya chata sandhi dasata parajaka jatika dese tu dhammam anukampi mam pajam.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammam sangham namassami. Well, I had in mind to speak about a general sort of theme tonight. So general, in fact, that I'm going to focus on a kind of analogy to hopefully to bring a little light to it, or to stimulate a bit of thinking and maybe recognition around it. And the theme is practice. In particular, let's say when we think of the relationship of right view, right effort, things of this kind, questions. When is our effort enough? When is it too much? Not enough? What is enough? What comprises enough in practice? And there are so many questions that come out of this. At least when we start out, it seems that we think of our practice, what we do when we're sitting in some sort of position on a little cushion on a special little lily pad in our bedroom, or on a particular chair that we have set aside, or something like that. So we think about it in very kind of refined terms, or what we do twice a year at a retreat, or once a month when we go to a friend's house and gather with a few other folks. And over time, I think for most, probably all people, the question of what comprises practice just begins to spread and spread until it becomes difficult to say what isn't practice, in a way. That is, when we're feeling engaged, but sometimes we don't feel engaged, and that's quite natural. And when we are dedicating ourselves to it, we also recognize that there may be times when we don't understand what's at work, or when we are applying effort in the wrong place, or my continual vexation is learning how very delicately to get out of the way, to get out of my way, just to let the practice begin to breathe naturally, so to speak. So there are so many suttas that one could speak about here, and I'll just mention one that probably most or all of you have heard before. Certainly it came up often in my early years in monastic life, or what will probably the obvious reasons, involves the Venerable Sona, namesake of the abbot of Brooklyn Monastery. And the backstory to him, if you need it, is that he had been, as a layman, a lute player, or whatever the equivalent of a lute was in India of that time. I don't think they still have lutes, unless there are avid Renaissance musicians in India, and why not? Anyway, Venerable Sona was a very ardent practitioner, and he was one night, I think it was a night, maybe not, doesn't matter. He was spending hours and hours walking barefoot on his walking path. And of course, walking is one of the principal forms of meditation, is taken, praised by the Buddha. One of the four positions of the body: sitting, walking, standing, and lying down. So he was walking. And if you do that long enough, of course, no surprise, it's quite taxing, isn't it? If you've ever gone for a long hike. But walking meditation, of course, it comprises of being on a dedicated walking path of some kind, just walking to and fro, walking, stopping, turning around, walking back, stopping, and so forth. And done for a number of hours, it's you've been involved in some practice, and I'm not sure. I don't think the sutta says how long Venerable Sona was walking, but I know sometimes mention one of the famous examples of this in more recent times in India. I think this old forest monk was, he would do walking meditation 15, 16 hours a day. So that gives you a sense of the kind of dedication that can be exerted. Anyway, Venerable Sona also had very delicate feet. That's we're coming to the nub of the story here. He had very delicate feet. This also is famous with the historic Venerable Sona. And his feet had opened up. They were bleeding. I think the description in the sutta is something like, it looked like what's the word, an abattoir, I mean, it looked like a slaughterhouse kind of thing. It was just, he was just pushing on and on and on, and his poor man, his feet were bleeding all over the walking path. And the Buddha, from some distance, and I'm afraid I haven't read the sutta for years, but from some distance knows what's occurring and appears. I think it was one of those spontaneous, he didn't sort of walk from the other end of the monastery, but rather he appeared. And as the commentary sometimes notes, sometimes the Buddha asks the question even while knowing the answer. Asks Sona something like, how are you faring? And Sona says, well, this is difficult practice, Venerable Sir. This is very difficult practice. And so the Buddha says to Sona, interesting. You were a lutenist, I believe, in your lay life. Is that not so? Yes. And and you had to tune your lute regularly, correct? Yes. And when the note was flat, what did you do? Well, I had to tighten the string because it didn't sound right in relation with the other strings, and just it wasn't the right note. And what happens if it was sharp, if your note was sharp? Well, I had to loosen it. I had to loosen the string to bring it back into the proper relationship with the other strings and into full tune. And so the message here is that practice can, in very broad terms, go either way. It can be too loose, but obviously in Sona's case here, he was exerting too much effort. You might say the wrong kind of effort, or not understanding where effort really resided, or so on and so forth. So he relaxed his practice. He saw immediately, of course, being an intelligent um, young practitioner with doubtless a great deal of parami, because he was born and also became a monk during the time of the Buddha himself. So this is in itself a cause for a kind of delight and mudita. So in no long time, then the Venerable Sona became one of the arhats. So that's an obvious example of the string being too tight, practice being too severe, not moderated, not understood quite yet in the correct way. Just a kind of personal example, I was in Asia for a couple of months this last winter, and then arrived back from equatorial Malaysia, Thailand and Malaysia. I was in, and came back from Malaysia to be greeted by, of course, the tail end with the seemingly endless tail ends of a Canadian winter, when it warms up a little and then it snows again, and et cetera, et cetera. I won't complain too much. And so I guess my body is a little bit more accustomed to Asia now. And so I found, so the winter retreat ended. So the kind of open, spacious time ended. Meanwhile, I picked up a bug, in my travels, probably coming back from, it was just a few days in London visiting some family there. Anyway, and then I had a few days of, a day of feverish, and then just feeling kind of out of sorts, and then what is kind of typical for me, which is making a sort of graceful transition from the long kind of periods of openness in the winter retreat back to just a regular schedule of morning, evening pujas, and the chanting, and then the work periods we have here, and all of that kind of thing. So a further engagement in the normal stuff of the monastic life. So it always seems to take a bit of time for me to kind of recalibrate. And on this occasion, after having been sick also, and also just the body kind of feeling the abrupt of being affronted, I guess, by the weather, there's this sense of just adjusting also very much to the bodily temperament. So a lack of energy and a lack of focus, and that kind of thing. And then the question, so this you might say is energy and practice of a slack kind, just kind of having to bring my energy back and bring my enthusiasm for practice back. So we have both ends of the scale here, and I think anyone can relate to similar kinds of things, because the body has its moods, and moreover, of course, it's the mind, because the body is in the mind after all. The body is held in attention, held in awareness. So we all have to deal with this sort of thing. And I was reading a little passage about speaking of attunement and strings and all of this, reading something some of you may have read from Ajahn, in which he talks about I'll just quote him here: the rightness of right view and other factors of the path carries the connotation not only of being correct, but also of being just right. So being correct is what I kind of take from that at the moment. At the moment I'm thinking about it, at least, is we do struggle for getting things right, being correct, and quite often there's a good deal, a great deal sometimes, of self involved in that. So the brows are furrowed, and we've studied what practice looks like, and then we grit our teeth and we do it, and without intending to, Very often, practice of this kind has a kind of tense quality to it, rather like Venerable Sona's, although very unlikely to that extent. But still, it has that quality of tension, there's selfness involved, there's effort, and there is desire involved, desire to get it right. But this sense of being just right, yeah, when we kind of ease into a practice and we find the proper harmonious quality, the equilibrium, where there is that kind of nice quality of where the muscles are working a bit, but not too much, and we can carry on in this fashion maybe for several hours. Thinking here, say, of going for a hike and finding just the right pace, where we can continue for a good long time, several hours maybe, with short breaks for a bit of water and a sandwich or something. But we're not tiring ourselves out, but we're very likely to kind of make a good day of it and see that view. Yeah. So finding that sense of just rightness. And when things aren't right, I think Thanissaro also goes on to say in this passage, in this particular essay of his, that it's quite possible for, say, a stringed instrument to be tuned to a discordant scale. So here you have a sense of practice which is being engaged in with wrong view operative. So there is a kind of practice going on, and it seems to be coherent. Maybe you can think of a particular set of notes on a guitar or something, which they have a relation to one another, but the scale itself has a kind of discordant. It's kind of off. For some reason, I'm thinking here of some of you will know, I'm sure, Dr. Emoto, the Japanese scientist who took these photos of water crystals developing. And among other things, he showed crystals developing in the presence of say, hard metal music or something like that, as opposed to a Mozart sonata or something of this kind. And they actually, by the way, on the same theme, if you've seen this book, it's illustrative of frequency, of the fact that our emotional life, our thoughts carry frequency and have effect. So it's actually quite a profound reflection when you think of it. To the extent that I'm getting this is a little riff on this book, but to the extent that he had people have 2 canisters of rice in their kitchen. I guess if you're a Japanese householder, everyone has canisters of rice just on the counter, and one of them they would print out the word hate. I hate you, something like that, something really kind of violent or not very nice, and that would be stuck to one canister. And on the other canister, it would say, I love you, or thank you, or something like that, express gratitude or love. And that would go on the other one. And it was discovered that the one that had this negative expression printed on it and attached to it, the rice in that container would go sour, would go rotten. Well in advance of the other canister. So anyway, and the water crystals that were related to these kinds of emotions, to these sorts of music, relatively speaking, were either kind of malformed or very beautiful, really quite exquisite. So it's just a kind of reminder that all of these things have different, you could say, dimensions. So we can speak of a feeling of experience. We can speak of feeling attuned to practice when it's just right. And there may be feelings involved. we may have particular bodily sensations or some sort of bodily knowing that this is correct practice, say. And perhaps for people who are very energetically attuned, there may be a clear quality of what would you say, a kind of frequency involved in this. So practice, yeah. I mean, practice is so wonderfully general a term that we use with I think with value and importance, but still it's so general a term. But it doesn't just relate to the arts. It relates to business, salesmanship, relates to friendships, relationships, sewing, anything. Yeah. But there's something about the craft, the art of music, which I think culturally speaking has a lot to offer as a kind of analogy for our meditative life and our practice of the Buddhist path. Because it's obvious to anyone that you need to sit down and do your scales or practice your fingering or attune your ear and all of these things that come in music. And I'm quite some time ago, I read this interesting article about it was about these general things, and it involved in part a discussion of one of the Beethoven late quartets. Some of you might be somewhat familiar with these things. Maybe some of you are very familiar with them. Late quartets are kind of known in the classical repertoire as being very difficult, very advanced, very advanced pieces of work. And it's pretty amazing because, among other things, Beethoven was deaf when he wrote them. So one of them, string quartets usually have, I think, four or five movements in them. So these quartets they'll have particular movements. When the quick movement and a slow movement, and the movements might be in different keys and that kind of thing. And one of these, Opus 131, I had to look it up today. I'm not so knowledgeable about this stuff, but this is quartet number 14, Opus 131. One of them has 7 movements. Okay. Now, one of the things that distinguishes, and I'm sure you've all heard orchestras and symphonies and so forth, and there'll be a movement, and then there's a short rest, there's a short break, and then the next movement begins. So the conductor kind of sets the stage again, or string quartet, they turn the page in their music, and away they go. But one of the values of the break is that, especially well, if you're a trumpet player, I guess you can kind of clean out your valves. But for string players, they can just quickly retune slightly if they've gone a little flat, which can happen during playing. But here's the thing about this particular string quartet: 7 movements. There are no breaks. So what's the message there? The message is, you tune as you go. You tune as you go. And that, I think, is rather like life, isn't it? Because we don't, when we're doing what we're doing here tonight, you've come into your quiet place and you've begin to sit in meditation and so forth. So this is a kind of rest, you might say, taking in new ideas and reflecting and contemplating. But most, or at least much of life is not like this, unless you're elderly, retired, or what have you. But for most people, a great deal of life is not like this at all. It's getting up in the morning to some sort of raucous alarm and splashing water on the face and being a little late, catching the next bus, and there tends to be a kind of hurry quality to it in many domains, including making enough money for the rent or for the mortgage, and getting the kids off to school, and so many things, so many dimensions. Where is the rest in that? Where do we retune? Where do we bring things into quality of being just right again? Well, that's where practice comes into play. Now, probably all of you, maybe most of you, I imagine, have been on retreats, and I think one way of looking at a retreat is it's a practice of tuning, refining the ear, as it were, refining the bodily sensations, our awareness of what is just right in practice. Because we get things wrong, of course, that's why it's practice. Was the Buddha practicing? No, the Buddha was not practicing. He was just sitting. He didn't have to practice anymore. He had absolute pitch, you might say. He was fully practiced. But we need to, and we need these breaks. And it seems, at least for a person just becoming acquainted with the spiritual life, maybe one of the first questions is, "Oh, where am I going to fit this in? I think this is a good idea, but where can I make some time in my life? I don't have 2 weeks, to go on a retreat or a 10-day retreat or something. I only have." And I got my family. So the issue of time and energy and all of the practicalities of things intrude. Over time, though, when some kind of discipline is brought to one's life, and periods of a day or night are opened up just to allow for even 10 minutes at a time or something, or repeating a very valuable reflection, almost a kind of mantra to oneself, and just sitting and remembering to watch the breath for a few minutes, putting a little timer at your desk at work, and when it buzzes, you just close your eyes and take one mindful breath. There are ways of intruding on the intrusions of daily active life, and reminding the mind to be aware of the present moment. Now, these reminders do gather. They do gather energy. Part of the reason they do that, part of the opportunity for that to happen, is that we honor them, we value them, and so over time, some kind of sense of practice breathing into life in more general terms begins to emerge, begins to bud on the vine. Everyone brings a different quality of attention and sincerity, I guess. Everyone has different, we say, spiritual paramis, practices, things that we've learned maybe in past lives, or just abilities to be attentive and interest in this kind of practice in life. But with the right conditions and with some sincerity, these things do begin to emerge, do begin to dawn on one's life. So meditation retreats are extremely valuable because they sometimes, I think, for people, they're the only way that it's like sitting in a practice room for long enough to finally become more easy with your scales or whatever it is. And you forget fairly quickly when you get back into your life, but at least you knew them, and you can revive them, you can return to them. And that it's worth, that practice actually does bear fruit, and it's worth returning to for that reason. But eventually it's up to us to find how to make a life a kind of work of art, to bring, to realize the music of life in daily terms, and even to express that in our relationships. It's in this way, I think, that we have the potential, the possibility of making life a kind of work of art, something beautiful that we can share, we can take delight in and honor in our own way, because these forces are in a large way, in an important way, outside of ourselves. It is, as I've said earlier, largely a matter of getting out of the way. And then you realize what can actually happen in practice. One distinction that I find useful to make is actually something I think that Carl Jung made at some point. We are normally looking for the feeling of knowing. We want to know. We're looking for the feeling of knowing, that sense of something being indubitable. Finally, I've realized something. But what Jung saw as being more valuable, and perhaps the feeling of knowing is in a sense a kind of trap too, because then our practice can be very much in the head. And what he felt was more valuable actually it's a subtle difference, but a very important difference, is rather than the feeling of knowing, rather the knowing of feeling. Seeing that as a kind of something to aspire to, the feeling, the knowing of feeling. Feeling sensations of the body, but the moods, think of the foundations of mindfulness. Really bringing these foundations of mindfulness, the various dimensions of mindfulness, into awareness. And they have their feelings, their qualities, their moods, their tones. So it's in this kind of way that we can. I'm just this evening. I'm just using what perhaps is a different way of looking at practice, because sometimes we get into ruts about thinking about practice in particular ways. We aim in particular ways, and our aim is very, very much focused on very distinct goals. Sometimes, it's no great secret, of course, that the Buddha was a master of similes, and this understanding of the value of analogy. He was a genuine genius in this. And I think all of us sometimes can bring insight into questions we have through the reflective means of employing analogy or simile. And so I'm just doing this, and it gives me a good excuse to talk a little bit about music too. So I'll leave my reflections for now, and welcome any questions you may have.
Sadhu, 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 anumodami. If I could help facilitate, if people who have a question would either raise their physical hand or use the reactions, and under there is a hand symbol that you can select, raise hand, and then we can take each person in turn, unless it can be spontaneous too if there isn't a long lineup. So feel free to unmute yourself when you're next to speak, or the floor is open.
Bhante,
Yes,
Ajahn, I have a question, and I don't know if it's appropriate, but I guess what I'm seeing a lot of is in a lot of the meditation retreats or people in some communities, they have organized what they call a mushroom sitting, where they take mushrooms to alter their minds. And I'm just wondering, I'm having a lot of trouble accepting that, because I'm thinking about the precept of not taking intoxicants. And to me, doing that is taking intoxicants, but also it would be more of a hindrance than a merit in terms of being, practicing mindfulness. I wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I have no experience of these things, but I like most of us. Although I haven't heard about such things in Ottawa. Maybe it's a little more common in Vancouver. Vancouver's a little more hip, I think, than Ottawa. It's a pretty conservative town, as you know.
Yeah,
Well, it's a liberal town, of course, formally speaking, but anyway. But yeah, I of course, like most of us, I've heard about ayahuasca. Of course, that's the famous one in South America, and various Don Quixote, or Don Juan rather. Sorry, not Quixote. Don Juan and Quixote. So, but your initial reading of it is in line with Buddhist thinking and the notion of the precepts. I mean, trying to think of it's like you picked up your instrument, and all of a sudden it's tuned to a scale, or it's tuned in a way that you don't recognize at all. And you might be lucky and be able to produce some music or find some music in it, but there is a lack of not sure if the word control is right, but one's own awareness is somehow seconded, or is in the side of things. And I'm not even really addressing here what people do relate. I mean, I think that I have actually a friend from years back who recently confided in me that he'd experimented with this, and found it really useful and very insightful in a number of ways. And then I don't recall whether he had decided, after, in light of having used it once or twice, that would be enough. But he was describing some value from it, and I guess in a way I don't want to discount the possibility that some people have found therapeutic value in these things. I'll probably end up just talking myself in a circle, because I'm certainly not I'm not skilled or qualified to speak about under what circumstances they could be of value, and maybe I just don't have a lot of opinion on it. But I think as Buddhists, the first of all, I would say the Buddha was probably very well aware of similar kinds of practices and substances from ancient India. I mean, soma is the kind of canonic example of this from the Vedic period. So I'm sure that there were also substances like this during the Buddhist time as well. But he did not find value in them. And I trust his judgment on this. I trust his judgment on this myself. Yeah. Having said that, I mean, the people who are doing this, Connie, may or may not see themselves as Buddhists or whatnot, and I don't really want to judge people for the things that I've read about this indicate that people very, can go into these things with very serious and very sincere intentions, and some people seem to derive what they feel is a great deal of benefit from them. The possibility of some harm, some damage, I think, is also possible. Set and setting is the old phrase that came out of the psychedelic period, and so. Anyway, it's a good question, and it wasn't inappropriate. It's just I don't have too much expert knowledge to add to it, but I would advise to remain clear of these things. There's something wonderfully kind of holistic about doing this practice in full awareness, realizing that awareness itself deepens, broadens, becomes more powerful. And that the possibilities of the mind and of our wonderful attention and the capacities of the mind, various forms of knowing. I mean, these things do open up in people's awareness, in people's experience through meditation. And the greatest thing of all, of course, is the dawning of wisdom. And sometimes we're looking for different things. People aren't necessarily looking for wisdom in Buddhist terms, and that's quite all right. And as I say, they may be very serious. They may be engaged in very dedicated practices around slightly or rather or quite different aims than what that probably we here are seated for. And more power to them. I wish the best for them. And we're all, in some ways, we're all struggling along in our own way, doing the best we can. So we need to have a good sort of fellow feeling, good sense of compassion for other folks as well as for ourselves, because none of us, I don't think, have got a bead on the truth quite yet. So we'll cheer each other on and do our best. Thank you.
Thank you. And I thank you for answering that question for me, because I was caught between the precepts and I began to realize how important those are in guiding us in in the path.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, quite right. Yeah, virtue is an inestimable foundation for our practice, and keeping those precepts is one of the. I mean, obviously, people use intoxicants and hallucinogens for very ignoble and very shallow reasons. So that's why, in a way, I'm kind of making a bit of a distinction. I don't feel like I want to be just standing in judgment over people at all. But I think if we honor this tradition, we should have some sort of a sense of deep faith and trust in the Buddha's judgment on things like that. Yeah, thank you, Mary. I think you had we may have an expert here. Would you like to add to that, or do you just have a different question?
Yeah, I have very little experience of this as well, but what I had heard was that people could have, what felt like very meaningful, very powerful experiences, but then when they were off the drug or the mushroom or whatever, then they didn't seem to be able to apply it to their lives. That's what I had sort of heard, that it seemed the memory is of a very wonderful experience, but then there just seems to be a lack of ability to integrate it into their life. But yeah.
Thank you.
Anyway, I have a question about mala beads. Do you have any suggestions of how to use them in meditation practice? Yes.
Yeah. I was given these by a friend in Malaysia. Okay. My most, I put them to use most frequently in walking meditation. It's just the way I do it. it's good to have a bit of a goal in terms of time, how much effort you're going to put into something. And walking is a very easy, because you're going back and forth, is a very easy thing to count. But nobody wants to say 1, 2, 3. And I don't really like having to look at my watch. If I say I'm going to walk for an hour or whatever, 2 hours, I don't want to have to look at my watch. It feels kind of don't want to do it. It's too fussy. So I have my beads, and I just every march along the path, I just count a bead. So I'll instead say something like, I'll do 2 rounds of my set of beads or something like that. So that's one way I do it. Sometimes this is something I experienced in the Thai tradition in some monasteries a few times, quite a number of times, was chanting a lot, like say Iti Piso, or what we did before beginning to sit, and you can use the beads are a good way to count those off too. I mean, we would do 108 Iti Pisos. The full round would be 2¼ hours if you really get some speed behind you, and so you're just counting. So I mean, it's just counting again. I'm fond of wood, so I find it quite pleasing to have them in my hand, just fingering them, you might say. I also use them when I travel, say in a car. Not all the time, but I mean, because in a car, especially when you're living in a quiet place, I mean, you live in a quiet place too. Then when you get in a car and you're traveling, and there's all this advertising, and other cars are going by and passing this way and that, and the noises, energy, attention, the sensation, sensory input is being drawn away from you a great deal. So sometimes I use them just to bring my attention to the sensation of contact with the beads. That's another way I do it. But I expect, say, in the Tibetan tradition, let alone the the various schools in Hinduism, and that they would have many more uses for them. These are just the ways I make some use of malas. Yeah.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
have you got a nice set? What are they made from? I can't.
It's just wooden. It's from Dr. Ong.
Oh, nice. Well, that's a nice association in itself.
Mm-hmm.
Rhonda, did you have your hand up earlier?
Thank you. Hello, Ajahn. Pavaro. Hi. I just we have Ajahn Dhamma coming to Canada in June. He's going to be doing a day-long in Victoria, and with Victoria IMS, and then going to see family and go to Birken. And we're working on a day-long in Vancouver. And what I wanted to ask a question about, it's a logistical question, as to when you were teaching at St. John's. I was wondering which group helped you to book that event, or you've been there.
Yeah, I think the person involved with that was Bodhi David Adam. He lives in Vancouver. I believe he set that one up. If I'm not mistaken, have I been there twice? I think I've done a couple things on the campus. Anyway, if it's the place I'm thinking of, it was Bodhi David Adam. Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, I'm afraid I don't know whether there are any particular, logistical things that need to be dealt with for them in particular.
Yes.
And I don't even know how they were to deal with, but I imagine when Lumpur Tiradama was there, is good because it's out of term, I would imagine. So they probably, hopefully, you've got the space and the time and all that. to arrange it. Anyway, lucky you. I'm not sure if I'll be seeing Lamportira when I may be coming to BC in July. So it sounds like I'll maybe miss him. Yeah, he's a wonderful teacher and just a
He is.
refined monk. Yeah.
He's going back July 18th for the Vasa back to
Okay.
Australia. So it's
Okay.
quite a quick trip.
Yeah. Going back from BC on July
Yeah.
18th.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we'll see. I have BC is a very complicated place for me because I know people all over the place and brothers and Ajahn and all sorts of. So I've got to work out an itinerary. Yeah,
Thank
it would be
you.
lovely to, yeah. I hope if I don't see him though, please pass along my respects and love.
I will do that.
Thank
We'll
you.
do that. And we were in the application for it. It's just they wait until the school is out in April.
Mhm.
And then they begin to look at bookings, but we were just excited about getting a place to be
Yeah,
able to have a day
yeah.
long.
I think he's done it at Capilano College before, right?
Okay.
Yeah, because gee, I can't remember the gentleman's last name, but there's a chap, but this gentleman now lives in Thailand, I believe. So, and he taught at Capilano College as well, so that was maybe a bit of an in. Anyway, so good luck. Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
yeah, much merit for being an organizer of such things. It's a good way to make merit.
Well, that's I love making merit and giving it to my parents.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Yeah. Merit is happiness. There you go.
It is. Thank you, Ajahn.
You're welcome.
I see Carol with her hand up.
Thank you for this evening, Ajahn Pavaro. It's Carol.
Hi, Carol.
Hi. You recommended chanting for me, and I'm getting the Abhagiri chanting books spiraled so I can have them on paper.
Oh yeah.
Just in case I don't have access to my iPad or my computer.
Yeah, good idea.
I wanted to have it handy. But I was wondering if you had any certain chants that you thought would be really appropriate.
Well, the first ones would be ones that you love. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But sometimes I don't know that. Sometimes I don't know the Pali. You know, the word. I was the English, of course, is easy, and some of them I've heard enough that you know I can chant them in Pali. But
Yeah.
some of them I'm no good at.
Well, here's your chance to get a little better. Practice.
That's true. That's true.
But yeah, if you're doing a little bit under duress, but for whatever reason, you just got to do your best. But if you, for instance, if you get that book in the next couple of days, maybe you've got a bit of time, say to do the Karaniya Metta Sutta just a few times is enough to. Also, here's a good idea. Also, I'm sure Abhayagiri, but definitely Amaravati. If you go onto the website, you can download their chanting. You don't have to do it then, and they can chant it very well. And so you can listen to it. You can listen to it as much as you like. And I think there's a certain kind of power that comes from, there'll be whatever 10, 20 monastics doing it. Lovely, the Siladharas as well as the bhikkhus. So that could be very, very, very pleasant and very uplifting for you. I'd certainly recommend that. I mean, any of the chants are good, but yeah, I go first to ones that you like, that you have a little bit of familiarity with, and so a sense of its particular value and importance. So I would maybe focus on that, because you don't want to get overwhelmed or feel, oh, I need to do that one as well, or you don't want to the mind to get in a kind of confused or agitated state around chanting, right?
Well, I was looking at it more like when you took us on the on the trip. And how, you know, how much you talked about how the value of chanting.
Mhm.
And I thought chanting would be good, that even when I can't maybe listen to talks, that the
Mhm.
chanting would be something that would really sustain me.
Yes.
So I was looking at it from that point of view.
It's
That
energizing. You know, it is energizing. You're engaged. You're not a kind of passive recipient to listen to you chant, as beautiful as that can be. But yes, you're engaged. Your body is engaged. You know, your voice, is it loud? Is it soft? And that kind of thing. So it is a kind of practice for any. I mean, any of us when we're sick, for instance, or what have you, and we they will take on a kind of agency of their own. You know, they'll come to us. I mean, I found this when I was in hospital for those years ago. I mean, it was a natural thing because I do it quite a bit. You know, because of my lifestyle, it was quite a natural thing for my mind to go there, and it felt very comforting, very focusing, very. There was mindfulness there, and it was an obvious and important thing to do. So, you know, in whatever time you have before you at the moment, you know, take a couple of them that you have some familiarity with and just begin to chant. And if nothing else, then use the audio files to practice with. Because if you feel like you're stumbling on this or that word, just listen to how they do it. You know, so yeah, yeah.
advice. Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
having some things like that memorized, you know, taken to heart, you know, there's a reason we use that expression, is very valuable. Um, um, just another thing, you said, you know, the English one, you know, of course we all know the English one probably, but don't take it for granted that those in fact are very powerful phrases and ideas. One thing that I do to remind myself of that is not to go, as nice as this is when we do it as a group, this is what should be done by one who is skilled and good. You know, okay, we've all done that. But then take it as a practice and just slow it right down. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness. I mean, just that phrase can bring tears to my eyes. Being skilled in goodness, how wonderful a thing is that? Yeah. Every phrase in that discourse, it's been chanted and practiced with and repeated for 25 centuries. Every phrase in that is pregnant with meaning and power. So you know, maybe think about returning to something like that and just take it slow. Really slow it down to find out where that power might reside for you. So that's another way of sitting with that.
Thank you.
Really good to see you.
Nice to be here.
Oops.
Are there any other questions or comments?
Is that Ken Anderson? Is that the same Ken that I know who's married to a woman named Judy? No, that's not.
No, it's not.
It's a different. It's a different Ken. I was so happy I remembered Judy's husband's name. I only met him the once.
No, Brian just sent me a message there that I should turn my camera on. You might know me, but I'm going, I know him from where? Been around for a few years, but I'm over in Nanaimo now, so I don't get up to the Vancouver stuff much anymore. So I don't know, but I like the online way they communicate. It's pretty good. I wish there was more like this that you could just drop in and meditate with people. Be good. Well, it is good, but I don't know. I should do more.
Well,
I
you're here tonight.
go through spurts. Some years I get really into it, and then I'll take I don't know. It's not lazy. It's just I don't know. I start doing other things. So
Yeah.
I'm on my path. I know that for sure.
Well, that's good.
Mm-hmm. So Brian, where would I know him from? When you said that, I can't remember.
Well, the Burnaby Theravada Sangha, Ajahn Pavaro came to visit us in the early 2000s. That's where he used to come, like 2003, 2004, that period.
Yeah. We're on Albert Street?
Yeah.
Really? Okay. Well, I was there. Alrighty. Would you call it a small Sangha? Actually, it's bigger and bigger, eh?
Are there any other questions? Would you like to do a chant, Ajahn Pavaro?
Sure.
Have I got, is it the loving kindness, the metta, Karaniya Metta Sutta? Let's have a look here.
There it is. Okay, well, we were just talking about this. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud and demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Wishing in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will. Whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to wrong views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Very good. Well, wish everyone the best, good health, happiness, good practice, and we see you again before too long, hopefully.
Thank you so much, Ajahn.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to see everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Thank you,
I would just, if I may just take a moment, if you wish to offer dana, you could do it directly to Tisarana, and I believe that link is in the invitation to tonight's Dhamma evening. Thank you again. Good to see everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you.